What's going on, you guys? Theo here with the big review, back yet again with another King of Fighters Allstar video, and in today's video we are going to be putting the spotlight on the newest Fest set to be added into the game with the Boss Syndrome Volume 3 banner, and that is of course going to be the NESTS Behind the Veil set. And before we get into all of that, make sure you guys smash that like button and subscribe, and just a friendly reminder, today is the very last day that you can get your name entered in to win that $25 Google Play or iOS gift card. Otherwise, the giveaway will be happening on the next Q&A video, so good luck to everybody who entered, and again, you have 24 hours to get your names in for that giveaway. So good luck everybody, and let's go ahead and get into today's video. So right off the bat, the effects are as follows. For your option skill, you are going to have a flat 7% increase to attack per card, otherwise known as a 21% increase to attack, which is pretty much standard fare for Fest sets in this day and age. And then when we take a look at the set effects, we are going to have an increase to penetration by 1200, with a 30% chance to deal additional damage equal to 450% of attack upon landing a crit. So both of these effects are very, very good. Increasing your penetration, otherwise known as your defensive shred, is always welcome, and you rarely see it on set cards, so that is something that makes this set stand out quite a bit. You see it a lot on the core effects for some of these NESTS characters, so it's kind of cool that they kept the theme going with that. Now, the 30% chance to deal additional damage equal to 450% of attack upon landing a crit is going to be very similar to what we see with Akane. Now, of course, Akane has been very popular for a very, very long time, and that is going to be one of the card sets that we are going to be comparing this one to over the course of this video. However, there are a few differences, the biggest one being that you need to land a critical hit with this set in order to get that 450%. Now, this is something that is going to come up. Akane is going to have a chance at landing that burst damage much easier than this set will, and this set is really only going to be geared towards characters that are going to have very good crit. Otherwise, I would probably go with Akane, because Akane is just going to be more flexible in that regard. But you will see from this footage that honestly, the damage increase, decrease versus these two sets and some of these other card sets, it's really not a whole lot. We've talked about in the past that parity is very real in this game, and typically when you're talking about differences in damage with some of this stuff, a lot of times it's a lot less than you might assume, and you're going to see that bear itself out in this video. But then we also have a PvP exclusive. This is going to decrease damage received from enemies with super or hyper armor by 50%. This is a really good effect, especially when you consider that typically whenever a character is going to have that hyper armor specifically up on them, the player is going to be more apt to be more aggressive. So this is very beneficial, and this card set is really good for PvP in general. I've actually talked to Saint a little bit about this stuff, and he is pretty happy with this and the Boss Syndrome characters overall. So this is a pretty good set in general across a lot of different modes. The way that we're going to do things today is going to be a little bit different from our normal, and I'll kind of walk you guys through the process in today's video just so you guys are aware of what we did, and then I will show you guys the results of these runs, and then we'll go ahead and give our final thoughts. But basically, I did use KoF for these tests. Now, the way I did this is I took all of the cards off of KoF for his finishers, and I took the imprint stones off and left only the NESTS set or whatever set that I was testing at the time, and then the option cards that I used were going to be the Maxima cooldown reduction cards. So I do all of this whenever I do these things in order to basically show you guys the raw damage of the set and the character without any of the other bells and whistles, so that there aren't a bunch of other things going on. Now, in these rotations, we'll talk about the different rules here momentarily, but basically I just wanted to make sure that we were on an even playing field. So really what you're going to see going forward in these tests is just going to be this KoF without the finishers, without the imprint stones, with 2 Maxima cooldown reduction cards, and then whatever set we are trying to test. Now, KoF does not necessarily have the greatest crit chance in the world. And I did that by design. So basically, this is going to be a very tough thing to gauge. And I did about, honestly, you guys, I did about 20 of these runs a piece on these card sets. I think I did a few more than that with the NESTS set itself, as well as Akane. And the reason for that is both of these sets in particular, and the other set that I did as well, are all going to be very much so RNG based. So it's going to be very tough for you to get a good aggregate number for these things, because you're basically just going to have a different run every single time. You're not going to have a proper good baseline to work from with any of these sets. So what I ended up having to do is I ended up having to just go with the average aggregate. Again, we'll go over all of that here momentarily, but I used Akane as an example in here, of course, because that is going to be the set that is most comparable. But then I also did City of Darkness. So City of Darkness, the reason why I also used this card set is because with City of Darkness, it is going to be a very good set in general. So I wanted to go ahead and test this one as well. And with this one also being an RNG based set, I had to also do a lot of runs with this. So I did a lot of work for these tests in order to get all of this footage and get you guys proper numbers. So hopefully that bears itself out in this video. Beyond that, for those of you who are unaware, Serena is still going to be the top dog for any situation where you're tagging in and out. So I did not put that one in here. It wouldn't have been fair. Serena's just going to do more damage. And then when it comes to anything else, the Leah set, I didn't even put in here because honestly, Leah is not even going to have a chance. I had done some runs to try and test it and put it in this video, but it was about 3 to 4 million damage behind these other sets, so I didn't really feel like it was pertinent to put it in. It really wasn't able to keep up, and beyond that, none of these other sets really, I thought or felt like they really mattered in this conversation, so I went with all the hardest ones. I went with all the RNG based ones, so yay me. For those of you who are wondering, I did not use Gears of Fate. The reason being is City of Darkness is literally the exact same set. So there's really no reason for me to do both. They're going to have the same results. So anyway, that is pretty much what you need to know about that. Let's go ahead and get into the rules and the parameters of these tests, and then we'll go ahead and get into the tests themselves. Alrighty, you guys, so the conditions are as follows. A total of 20 plus tests per set were run at 30 skills per rotation. All other tests were thrown out. Due to the RNG nature of all of these sets, as we've already spoken of briefly, I chose runs that were in the middle or the average run to try and get an aggregate. Stones and offensive options were left off as to not muddy data, so that way we get a good, clear idea of how these cards are going to compare. And then it is also worth noting that being that NESTS set is purely based on crits, characters with higher crit chance will proc the effect more. We're just using Kyo here because I have a really firm grasp on what his damage overall is in a lot of these different tests, having used him over the course of the past few months. So we are going to be using him, but there are a lot better crit based characters out there, so you will only do better with better characters for this set if you choose a different character. But as far as these conditions are concerned, these are the parameters that I chose. I felt like these were going to be the fairest way of doing this, and so basically, all things being equal this way, all that we really have to contend with was the RNG, and I will make sure I preface this with letting you guys know, especially when it comes to Akane and NESTS set, there were times where they flip-flopped each other in damage, so there were times where one was better than the other, and vice versa. A lot of it just comes down to the RNG-based nature of both of these sets. Again, there is no way for me to control that. That's just the nature of these card sets that are going to be RNG-based, but keep that in mind in case you are wondering. They're both extremely similar in output. But with that all being said, let's go ahead and get into the tests. Now, first up here, we are going to be running City of Darkness, and City of Darkness is basically going to be just as good as Gears of Fate here, so you can kind of consider both of those sets the same as far as output. But again, we are going to be doing 30 skill rotations total, so that is going to be what we are going for with these average numbers. And again, these were just average numbers that I pulled one clip out of all of those clips that I had recorded, and this is going to be doing an average of around 24 million. I was able to clock it at about 25 at the highest, So it pretty much just comes down to the RNG proccing for that defensive drop. So next up, we're going to, of course, have Akane. Speaking of RNG, so with Akane, it was kind of interesting. These two sets are very similar in damage output with Kyo, but something to keep in mind again is that the NESTS set is definitely going to outperform the Akane set 9 times out of 10 on a much better crit-based character. So when you take a look at this, you're looking at 24 million point, I think this ends up at 2. Yeah, so 24.2. When it comes to the average number, that was kind of the average. Now this set was able to break 25 as well. That was the high end, but again, I just went for a good average. Now the NESTS set here ended up doing a little bit more than both of them at the highest. At the highest, it ended up doing around 25.6. So it was doing a pretty healthy amount of damage whenever it was proccing like crazy. But again, it is RNG based, so you're going to have to keep that in mind. The average was running just above Akane on average at about 24.6 to 24.7. So what can we take away from all this? So the overall takeaway from all of this data that I have acquired over the course of the past several days of doing these tests is basically going to be this. When it comes to the NESTS set, it is very, very good, and it is going to be the best overall set more than likely on any character that is going to be crit-based. So if you have a crit-based character, then you'll probably want to use the NESTS Behind the Veil set. It's also going to be an extremely powerful PvP set. So this set in general has its merits and does rank itself among the best in the game. However, things to keep in mind are going to be that this set isn't necessarily one that I would just throw on anybody. It's not necessarily going to outperform the sets that we've already had previously unless it is able to land those crits easily. So you're going to either need to pad and help it with other cards on the character, such as option cards that will help your crit chance, or you're just going to want to sequester it to a crit-based character, which is really what I would recommend. Now, when it comes to Akane, Akane is still going to be better overall for any character that isn't crit-based, in my opinion, just because these numbers were so similar. So that is something else to keep in mind. I wanted to use Kyo here because Kyo was a good example of a character that was going to be kind of an average character that wasn't necessarily a crit-based character, because I felt like if I would have chosen a crit-based character, then I would have given a clear edge to the NESTS set, and really I don't feel like that would have been fair overall. So I wanted to kind of keep it kind of in that middle ground there and on an average scale. So that's why I did that. And overall, with the other things here that you need to consider, I mean, really at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter what you end up doing with these card sets. They're all going to be very similar in overall output. And then the one thing that I will say is I was very surprised by the overall performance of the City of Darkness set, otherwise the Gears of Fate set, whichever one you want to insert here. Both of those sets are actually very good, and I like both of those sets quite a bit. And you will notice that just on an average character, this card set is going to actually be very strong. But the thing to keep in mind is it's definitely not going to be able to keep up with these other two sets as long as the RNG is in their favor, especially the NESTS set if it is going to be on a crit-based character. So that is pretty much the takeaways here, you guys. Hopefully you found this informative. If you guys did, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe. One other big piece of information here is we do have a new developer Q&A video that just dropped. I will hopefully have translations by tomorrow and I can walk you guys through that. If not, then we'll just go ahead and do our usual Q&A. But either way, I will be back very soon and I will talk to you guys then. Until then, peace.